Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which actually already currently exists in the Criterion Collection Spine Number catalog, physical media catalog, at Spine Number 2. But this year, on the occasion of 2024, the Criterion Collection has re-released this film, but employing or being based upon what is described as a new 4K digital restoration of this work. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about this film, which is described as being from the year 1954. And the name of the filmmaker is Akira Kurosawa. And the name of the work is Shinin no Samurai, or in English, Seven Samurai. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Seven Samurai, on many occasions in its grand history. And now this year, 2024, the tail end of 2024, we see yet another re-release of this great film, but this time employing what is a new 4K digital restoration from Toho and Company. There is actually quite a lot to say about the restoration and presentation, at least from my vantage point, how I view it. But I'd like to save those comments just for a little bit later down this video. But before we get to that, let me say that I have had the great honor of speaking about this film on this channel on a number of occasions. It is a film that I have seen so many times. I had the great fortune many years ago once to watch the film projected on the big screen in film projection, and it was one of the greatest movie theater going experiences of my life, and I will never forget it. It was an amazing experience because among other things, the film itself is so amazing, so powerful, so rousing, so emotionally in the present, and I love its focus on tactics. I love the focus on the various ways in which the class strata of this era of feudal Japan, or a certain aspect of feudal Japan, is in this microcosm of this struggle of the village. And the bandits and the samurai, who have this sort of uneasy combination, this uneasy alliance that further and further grows as the film progresses. Not to mention, of course, the great combination of action style, technique, cinematic craft, editing, and the cast and performances, among which are the great Takashi Shimura and Toshiro Mifune and others. This is such a great film. This is such a great film. I'm so fortunate to have been able to see it in my lifetime, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I will be able to continue to watch it for many years to come. Including, of course, its various iterations and various, say, re-releases and re-releases over time, as I say, including the most recent efforts with regard to the 4K digital restoration of this work, Seven Samurai, in Criterion and elsewhere. And again, we'll talk about that in a moment. So, with all that being said, I've spoken about this so many times, and so maybe the last thing that you need, my dear friends, is yet another long-form discussion on Seven Samurai. I don't want to bore you any more than I already have. I apologize profusely if I've done so already, but the last thing I would want to do is bore you about my feelings on this film. That I don't want to disrespect the film any further with any more comment that I might have on the film per se. But I do love this film so much. And I want to just express to you how much I'm so happy that the film is widely available in this way for people to either discover for the first time or to re-celebrate its legacy. I mean, it's one of the great films ever made for excellent reason. I mean, it's such a great film, and now that we've had now re-releases, which is yet another wonderful excuse to then watch the film again and just relive the excitement all over again, and the thrills, the highs and lows, all over again. I mean, it becomes a totally immersive experience every single time. So, as I say, I've spoken about it many times. If you're interested in how I might have spoken about it before, my dear friends, you can find those videos on this YouTube channel, which I humbly submit to you for your viewing, for your view here on this channel. Again, if you're so interested, as I say, I've spoken about it many times, and I don't want to tax your patience any further with another long form discussion about it. But with that out of the way, my dear friends, let me now, if it's okay, then go right into a discussion of my feelings and thoughts and impressions on what is this new release based on a new 4K presentation, restoration. Again, this is the Criterion Collection 2024 release of this great film, which is Seven Samurai. The Criterion Collection has re-released this film, Seven Samurai, Shichinin no Samurai, which is again described as being from the year 1954, which is from the director Akira Kurosawa. And among others in its great cast, we have Takashi Shimura, Toshiro Mifune, Daisuke Kato, and Minoru Chiaki, and others. And Seiji Miyaguchi and others. This is now purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration. According to the booklet, the 4K digital restoration is described as follows, and I quote, Seven Samurai is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This new 4K restoration was created from a 35mm master positive by Toho Archive Co. Ltd. Limited. The original negative of the film is no longer available. The original monaural audio was remastered from a 35mm soundtrack positive. Image Restoration Tokyo Archive Co. Limited with additional restoration by Prasad Corporation. Sound Restoration Toho Archive Co. Limited. Disc mastering next spec. And so, yes, the original negative of the film is no longer available according to these notes. Okay. So what we had before also was a kind of, I should point out, now we've had the film, of course, available in past releases, for instance, from Criterion. For instance, we had the DVD, old school DVD back in the day, and then more recently, although this was from circa 2010, the Blu-ray, which was at the time purported to be based on what was called the restored high definition digital transfer. And so what we have now is in 2024 a new 4K restoration, again undertaken under the auspices of Toho Archive here, according to the notes. So although it's been released in, say, different forms outside of Japan, one of the forms being the Criterion release, and then another form is one that I'll speak about momentarily. But this release by Criterion is a multi-disc set. It has the Blu-ray, it has the 4K disc, and it has the two Blu-rays, in fact. And the way it looks, actually, in terms of the layout, is right here, just for your information. I have the discs sort of maybe out of order. I should have put the 4K disc in the single disc slot rather than here. But this is the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray here in red, and then the black color disc being the 4K. Again, I apologize for being maybe out of order, for those. Yes, I apologize for that out of order placement of the discs. But the point is that it's a 3-disc set, one 4K disc, and then the two Blu-rays. And so we have the 4K presentation made available on the 4K disc. And it's my understanding also, just again, It's not clear from the liner notes, but my understanding is, in fact, the older presentation is what we see on the Blu-ray, and you can kind of tell. At least I think that way because of the sort of specks and the scratches that one sees associated with a high definition or the earlier transfer. Whereas the new 4K, it's markedly different in terms of the way that looks. So that's my understanding. Again, based on my own subjective viewpoint, is that the Blu-ray is actually the older presentation, whereas the 4K is this new 4K presentation. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But that's how I seem to view it. But let me now then focus our attention, if I may, on what this 4K restoration entails, at least in the hands of Criterion here. And again, please pardon me for my, I don't present screenshots or anything like that. I apologize for that. Many other sites online do this much better than I could ever hope to achieve. So please check out those other sites if you're if you can find better presentations than I. I can only speak from my own subjective viewpoint, which is what I'll do right now, which is this is very, how should I put it, cleaned up, really cleaned up in terms of those scratches and, say, film blemishes, to the point where, I'm reminded of another, like you see a frame and let's say there's a considerable shadow. Sometimes in the older transfers, you'd even in the shadow, you'd see little flickers of little white, say, hairline lines, or hair lines of a sort that would indicate some kind of possible damage to whatever the film material was that was the basis of this of that restoration or image, which I thought was really great. By the way, it lent a certain sense of, say, the what I'd like to call the historical artifact aspect of a film watch like Seven Samurai, again from the early to mid 1950s. And so it was the feeling that we're watching something that was derived originally from film, and I really loved that feeling. With this new 4K transfer, I would say most of those quote unquote blemishes or scratches are pretty much gone. They are gone. It's quite cleaned up in that way. And so the image, I think, as a result, becomes very sharp and very delineated, and so one can, in a sense, see a kind of almost clean, crisp, almost photograph realized sensibility in a kind of generalized expression of the term, which I think for some might be a really good thing. There's a way in which the lines are quite crisp and very delineated, and thus creating, I think, the potential for a very direct experience indeed. And I think, therefore, for some, this will be really a great way to turn to the film. And for me, too, I'm very happy. Overall, I'm happy with the way this looks. It's still, there's a certain sense of fidelity and faithfulness to the image, at least my impressions and understandings of it. Again, I don't hold myself out at all to be in any way, shape, or form an expert when it comes to Kurosawa films, or not to mention, of course, I'm not in any way an expert when it comes to the release history of Seven Samurai. But having seen the film a number of times, I can say that I like the ability to be able to watch something that has a kind of cleaned up aspect to it, but still feels faithful to the original image and scope and sound as well, which I think my impression of the 4K release of Seven Samurai is. So in that way, it is, generally speaking, going to be my overall default. However, let me just make a few points, which are, and I'll use another 1954 Toho film, which has also gotten a 4K restoration, which is Godzilla, or Gojira, as maybe a comparison. I spoke about this also on my channel, and I think the similar type of approach was made to the 4K restoration undertaken under the auspices of Toho for this one as well. Namely, the lines and the blemishes were more or less removed or diminished, or the effect of those were subdued, thus creating a quote-unquote more cleaned up image, end quote. That is the end result of the 4K release of Godzilla. And I think a similar mindset or similar approach is therefore happening with the 4K release undertaken by Toho here for Seven Samurai. However, I feel like the Seven Samurai 4K transfer is doing that much more in that the lines are even less pronounced and they are more obliterated than we did see in the Godzilla transfer. I mean, when I spoke about this, and I said even in the 4K, there are some faint residue of those hairlines and those film blemishes, which I personally like. I like watching those. Whereas I think that residue of film blemish is even more obliterated in the 4K of Seven Samurai. At least that's my understanding or my impression. Not completely obliterated, but even more obliterated, close to completely. My impression is anyway. Thus, I would say that that might work for some, and I'm of two minds of that. On the one hand, I really do appreciate seeing those blemishes and those lines cleaned up. Case in point, there's an early what's called a screen wipe edit, which is a wipe that goes from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, and it cuts to another shot, but it's a wipe edit. In the earlier transfers, including the Criterion transfer, and actually you can see it on the Blu-ray of the Criterion disc of this new Criterion release if you get it. It's one of the early ones where the farmers talk about, oh, let's go to the village square or let's go to the market square and try to find samurai that might help us. And they go straight to the square and they're trying to look for samurai. You can see the wipe. And actually in mid-wipe, there are actually some lines, some horizontal lines that occur that look like the film is being dragged, or maybe even maybe a blemish that might be taken from some kind of digital defect. I'm not quite sure, but it looks like that kind of digitized line effect in a certain portion of the frame as the film is wiping, edit wiping from right to left. Well, that blemish, if you call it that, is completely gone when you have the new 4K restoration, thus making for a very clean edit wipe from right to left. So now that's an example where I think the 4K quote unquote cleanup does a really excellent job in obliterating, say, those blemishes that might be said to be maybe on the erring on the side of not meant to be there, or maybe this film's purpose is even better served with those blemishes removed. So that's one example where I think this shines quite brilliantly. But there are other places where even maybe where there's an elderly man who's one of the key supporting characters of the village characters of the Seven Samurai, and you see him in his hut, and it's very dark, and sometimes you see around him the kind of specks of quote unquote the film blemishes or the imperfections in some of the earlier transfers, including the Blu-ray of Seven Samurai. Well, those are absent in the 4K release for the most part, or almost completely. And I don't know, on the one hand, it's nice to see the darkness really pronounced in terms of the shadow, but at the same time, it's like, I like to see that little flicker and the like, even in sort of the empty expanse of an empty farmhouse, where a father's calling out to his daughter in one of the key early scenes. There's the expanse of the house. In the earlier transfer, you'd sometimes see the flicker of the film lines, which I thought was really cool. It almost added like not just the historical artifact perspective, but also it's like, I don't know, there's still life in the farmhouse, even though there's still no one there. But that type of flicker is gone, or it's absent from the 4K in the philosophy, or under the what I assume is the philosophy of quote unquote cleaning up the image in that respect. So I think that's cause for celebration for some people who really love this film, and then maybe for others they'll like that approach, but still maybe want to revisit the older transfers for that type of, as I say, sense of, or the illusion of a kind of closeness to watching something that is a kind of historical artifact perspective. And so I think I'm more or less in the latter than the former. I really like the 4K presentation, but I will still like the opportunity to watch the film under, say, earlier releases to get that sense of something that came from a film source, even though I know it's digitized and now 4K upgraded, whatever, in today's age, and going into well into the 21st century now, but where everything is based upon data, more or less. But My point is that it's nice to get a sense of, even if it's an illusion, the illusion of something being from film, film stock. And so, especially when we understand based on the notes that the original camera negative no longer exists or no longer is available. So I think that type of flicker and that type of imperfection actually is very heartwarming. From my subjective viewpoint. So, uh, uh, yes, all things being equal, I more or less enjoy watching the 4K presentation under the Criterion release. Although I do like I think it does remove those blemishes quite extensively, and perhaps to a stronger degree than we had seen in a similar Toho film release of Godzilla. So it really is quite different. And I think some people, it might not work for some people, but maybe for many, that would be a good way of watching this film. And I think it is. I think this is a good, maybe default version going forward in terms of watching Seven Samurai. I mean, in terms of the look and sound, it's just, it's the photography is it's brilliant, and you see the raindrops, and you see the way in which like I noticed more than I did before just how like some of the raindrops hit the foreheads on some of our samurai characters in some key battle sequences that take place in the mud and the rain. So very interesting stuff indeed. I'm just that's one example, but so yes, overall I'm very happy with the 4K release. Although I'm still happy that I have my Blu-ray and other previous releases if I do want to watch Seven Samurai in those versions. Okay, now I must say also that I know that there were other releases by other non-Criterion labels, such as BFI, and BFI's release of Seven Samurai is actually right here. So I actually took the liberty of also getting the BFI release because there were a number of different supplements for the BFI release. This is the 4K BFI release. There were a number of different supplements, and also my understanding is the BFI transfer is in terms of the technical aspects. This is the booklet for the BFI release, and it says about the presentation for the BFI release. Seven Samurai was restored in 4K resolution using original 35mm fine-grained materials by Toho Co. Limited. So it says Co-Limited, to mark the 70th anniversary of the film's release, and it is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1, with the original restored monaural audio. That's interesting. It says here for the BFI release, it's Toho Co-Limited, whereas for the Criterion release, it says Toho Archive Co-Limited. So, but in any event, the appearance of the word Toho suggests to me that we're talking about something under the auspices of Toho, or parent company or affiliate company relationship, or group company relationship. Whatever the specific makeup of that corporate relationship is beyond my understanding. But okay, that's interesting detail. But what I also understand too is that the BFI release, it's not indicated specifically here in any of the pages, but my understanding is it is in HDR, or high dynamic range. That's my understanding in terms of the BFI 4K release. And my understanding, and if I'm incorrect, please let me know, but my understanding too, based on what I've been trying to find, say, online, and what people have been very kindly telling to me, is that that is one of the main key technical differences between the BFI in terms of its HDR and the Criterion release, which is not. Now, does that, high dynamic range, what is that, and what does it technically mean? I'm not a technician, I'm not an engineer, and I'm even in the context of 4K releases in this day and age, and I'm pretty bad when, as some of you who watch this channel can probably agree with me in saying I'm very bad when it comes to the sort of the technical composition makeup of these discussions. Bit rate and stuff. That's not my general concern. And I don't have the technical prowess or wherewithal to be able to discuss these in any satisfactory way. I can only speak about them from a subjective viewpoint, how I engage with the work, or just what I see and what I hear. And again, my eyes and ears are failing me with each passing minute as I get older. But the point is that yes, I did hear this technical aspect difference in terms of the HDR component, not knowing if it was, but not having any direct knowledge of the point. but relying also on what we have in terms of the writing on description on the presentations, etc., which I admit it doesn't go into so much detail in terms of the presentation restoration aspect in either the Criterion booklet or the BFI booklet, but just what I've quoted to you right now for each of the booklets respectively. So um, it's still kind of a bit of a mystery, to be perfectly honest, as to how much, if anything, there is in terms of a difference between these two presentations, which by all accounts should also, in theory, be pretty much the same anyway. And I think for the most part, in terms of my eyes and ears, when I watch the BFI 4K, and I've seen it a number of times now, and then when I watch the Criterion 4K, and I've seen that a number of times now, I discern very little, if any, difference. But, and so they're, I would say for the most part, again, based on my own ever aging and very old and weak eyes, I would say that they are pretty more or less close to similar. And so I think at the end of the day, if you're looking for a very strong presentation, and you're in the and you want to wonder which is the one to get, is the Criterion release or the BFI release. I think for most people, either one will suffice very strongly because they're both very strong, and I think for the most part they are more or less either uh, practically identical or very close. So similar to be practically identical. So it's a very engaging experience in terms of the removal of blemishes and lines and the sort of contours being pronounced, etc. So, but I can say that I think that the BFI release for me is able to. There's a sense of a capturing of, say, the sort of the richness of the blacks in the black and white photography are really go kind of deep, and it makes and for the most part I don't think it, maybe to my eyes, there isn't a huge difference in most of the scenes, but some of the scenes actually it becomes quite different, especially where we're dealing with water and where you're dealing with rainfall. I think in particular in the rainfall scenes and the water scenes, like ripples against a brook, a little stream that the samurai are when they're walking in the woods midway into the film, about, you see a stream or you see some of the characters walking by a stream. Sometimes you see the ripples of the stream surface itself. They come out quite well in the Criterion release, but I think for me, and to my eyes, the BFI's release of those scenes as examples really come out quite startlingly, very beautifully, and they are very pronounced. I'm not sure. This could be a result of the high dynamic or HDR technical component of this or not. But I thought about that, and I noticed too that there was a slight, maybe in those scenes, a slight, very almost imperceptible, a slight a gray sheen that I could describe being associated with the Criterion 4K release, whereas there is a more of a clear sheen to the BFI release, thus making for, I think, more sort of pronouncements in, say, ripples in the surface of a brook, or the raindrops as they pitter patter on, say, the thatched roof roof of a hut or something. So they are both very strong releases, but I think I was able to feel the sensibility of the black and white photography. And I think for me personally, I look at this film as having very sharp delineated black and white photographic sensibilities about the shapes and contours. And that's true, I think, from the earlier Blu-ray releases. And I think that's my memory in terms of how I associated with when I saw it in the movie theater many years ago. So I really like the Criterion Collection release very much. If the Criterion release collection in terms of presentation got, I don't know, I mean, I don't give scores or anything like that, but just to give it an example, if it got, say, I don't know, maybe if it got like if this got an 8.5 out of 10 in terms of the presentation, or 9 out of 10, I would say I would give the BFI release a 9.5 out of 10. Just that 1 point higher than the Criterion release, simply because it feels like to me that there are those very minute differences, but actually they do, I think, they do appear different. And again, maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe there aren't any differences. Maybe there shouldn't be any technical differences. But again, I don't think I can only speak from my subjective experience. So that to me is how I feel about the BFI release. So I think the Criterion Collection release is quite excellent. But if I had to say, if you ask me which one, basically you have to choose which one is the better, is the quote unquote better release. If you had to choose one, what would you? Probably would then say I would probably side with the BFI release. But then, of course, you have to take in consideration, is it worth it to you? I mean, is it easy for you to get, or do you have to pay extra shipping? Is the price tag exorbitant for you, or maybe the same is true for Criterion? I'm not sure. And so taking all those into consideration, it's not just about the presentation. It's not head and shoulders, one is better than the other. I think both are really excellent. Maybe there is a certain degree of, say, strength, one can say, that I think is associated with one over the other, but that's not the only consideration when considering these things. It's also about price tag, it's also about accessibility, shipping where applicable, etc. So taking all that in consideration, my dear friends, please take all that in mind. But you are ultimately getting in either hands, you're getting a very strong release, and I would say that nothing is being robbed from me when I'm watching the film in whatever version. I'm still getting the same visceral thrill, the same excitement factor that I'm getting when I watch it on the Criterion release, or when I watch it on the BFI release, or whatever the case may be. So you're in good hands either way. You really are in good hands either way. But I just wanted to let you know. I am very, very impressed with how the film looks in terms of this other label, the BFI label, which is what I have here. And so, yes, there we are. In terms of my feelings on the presentation. Okay, so now very briefly, my dear friends, let us just quickly touch upon the extras that we have together with the new 4K plus Blu-ray release of Seven Samurai. But in fact, it is the same that we have seen from prior releases. For instance, or actually not for instance, but the earlier Blu-ray, we've seen the supplements carried over from this really great Blu-ray earlier release into this new release. And so what are these? Just very briefly, and I think I've spoken about these elsewhere on this YouTube channel, so let me just go very briefly into what they are. We have, excuse me, we have two kind of commentary tracks. One is described as a scholars roundtable, and it says, this commentary features the renowned scholars and critics David Desser, Joan Mellon, Stephen Prince, Tony Raines, and Donald Ritchie, discussing Seven Samurai's signature style, historical importance, and ongoing influence. They were recorded individually in 2005 and 2006. And so this is like the Avengers assemble with respect to the great scholars in association with Japanese cinema, and also cinema writ large, and in particular in the context of releases like the Criterion release of Seven Samurai, and other films for that matter, as well as their own writings. So this is a really top-notch, really top-notch scholarly discussion. One commentary track available. And then the next commentary track, which is really great, this was an earlier commentary track from the 80s, I think it was, yes, 1988. And this is from Michael Jeck, and this is described as, this commentary recorded for the Criterion Collection in 1988 features Japanese film expert Michael Jeck, who has lectured on and programmed Japanese films since 1974. And so this is one of the early Criterion commentary tracks, and it's nice to have this not just as a record of legacy, but also, again, Michael Jeck presenting very, very well, very astutely. I actually had the great honor of meeting Michael Jeck very briefly. I mean, very, very briefly during my my university days. He was a guest of honor during one of the sort of Kurosawa Film Festival situations at the University Film Society. So it was, I just met him very briefly. Very interesting. So this is actually, I should take a step back and say, once again, you can watch the film on the 4K disc, or you can watch it on Blu-ray disc number 1. And then when you watch the film either on such discs, then you'll have the option of watching it with or without the commentary tracks. And just for information, we have the 2 available ones here. These are sort of legacy or archival commentary tracks, so we don't have anything new per se, new for 2024 per se, but these are really, really stellar. So if you have never had the opportunity to listen to these commentary tracks or watch the film with these commentary tracks, now is your opportunity with this now 2024 release from Criterion. So that is the quick state of affairs with regard to the commentary tracks for the Criterion release. Next, we have Blu-ray disc number 2, and as per customary with Criterion releases, the 4K disc will not usually house or contain the supplement section, but rather the supplement section will be found on the separate but corresponding Blu-ray. In this instance, we have Seven Samurai with regard to the 4K disc, and then the 2 Blu-ray discs. The film on Blu-ray disc number 1, and then the supplements on Blu-ray disc number 2, which is now what I have in the player. And we have a number of them which have been carried over from the previous releases, the previous release from Criterion from several years back. The first one is Akira Kurosawa, It Is Wonderful to Create. This is from the Japanese Toho home media releases that accompanied each of those Toho Kurosawa films. It's a kind of wonderful and very famous series of making of documentaries. And this is the one that's corresponding with Seven Samurai. And it's described as this 50-minute documentary on the making of Seven Samurai is part of the Toho Masterworks series, Akira Kurosawa, It Is Wonderful to Create, and features interviews with a number of Kurosawa's key collaborators, including writer Shinobu Hashimoto, set decorator Koichi Hamamura, script supervisor Teruo Nogami, and actors Seiji Miyaguchi and Yoshio Tsuchiya. This is classic, absolutely classic. I love the Masterwork series. I've seen all of them in the sort of various forms, primarily where you can watch them, say, as accompanying documentaries on the Criterion releases, respectively, of the Kurosawa films where they're available, but also in the Toho Masterworks. At the time, it was the DVD releases, so it was really great. So that's classic. So please check that out if you can. Next is My Life in Cinema, Akira Kurosawa. And it says here, filmed for the Directors Guild of Japan in 1993, this video interview features director Akira Kurosawa in conversation with fellow filmmaker Nagisa Oshima. The two speak at length about Kurosawa's life and career. This is really wonderful. Two real towering figures of cinema, but also of slightly different generations and approaches. And so this is also acknowledged in this way. And Oshima has such great deference and respect to Kurosawa, and also Kurosawa in turn has high regard towards Oshima. And it's a wonderful conversation. Really, it's like a real meeting of the artistic minds, two truly true giants of Japanese cinema together in just a very humble setting. It's really wonderful. Please check this out if you can. Next is Seven Samurai Origins and Influence. This is also a great one. This is really classic. And this is described as the samurai occupied a prominent place in Japanese film long before the celebrated heroes of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. This documentary, created exclusively for the Criterion Collection, takes a close look at the history of the samurai in Japanese life and art, and the influence of the samurai figure in film leading up to and culminating in Kurosawa's masterpiece. This is a classic, a very comprehensive, well-rounded supplement that's carried over from the earlier Blu-ray release, and it's giving kind of historical context, which I always appreciate, as well as the sort of historical context and how that's fused into cinema, especially cinema during the sort of immediate post-war era and beyond, in the hands of Kurosawa and others. So well done. Please check this out if you can. Then we have trailers and teaser, and then galleries, which are the behind-the-scenes galleries, and then the poster art and the sort of why am I forgetting the word? Why am I forgetting the word? It's a. I'm totally blanking on the word. I apologize, but it's a. You press forward and it gives you the next photo setup. So in these sort of galleries, like presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation or the like, and then the subtitle situation. So this is the state of affairs with respect to the supplements with regard to this new Criterion release. I should point out just a number of things just for reference in case you're interested. The Blu-ray, the BFI Seven Samurai, as I mentioned in terms of the presentation a little while ago, I think the presentation is quite strong indeed. But I just wanted to point out a number of things. First of all, I think there are, if I'm not mistaken, there are some subtle, yet perhaps in some instances quite significant differences in the subtitling of the Blu-ray of the BFI release versus the Criterion release. Based on my, I think both supplement. I mean, for the most part, they are the same, but there are some differences I noticed, and so, based on my general understanding, I think they're both quite reliable. Although perhaps if someone were to ask me, where in terms of subtitle accuracy, which one falls more higher on the scale, I would say they're both very accurate. So there's nothing drastically wrong or astray with either of these releases. So don't get me wrong, but I probably, maybe just thinking of a couple of examples off the top of my head, this is very anecdotal. It's not at all based on hard data or kind of count of hard statistical data, but maybe the Criterion Collection slightly edges out the BFI release in that category. But again, I think it's a very, very close race, if you want to call it that. But just keep that in mind in terms of the BFI release. It's all encompassing. Maybe there are some strengths of one release over the other, and then the other release might have other strengths to keep in mind. So there's that. Also, I should point out, I don't want to go into an involved analysis of the BFI release, but let me just repeat just for your reference, that it does have a number of great supplements. For instance, it does have the My Life in Cinema supplement, and it also has the Akira Kurosawa It Is Wonderful to Create Toho Masterworks supplement. But there are also a number of other and then just to keep in mind what else it has The Art of Akira Kurosawa, and also Philip Kemp's Selected Scene Commentary from 1999, and also a commentary written and recorded by Adrian Martin from 2024, so a very recent one, which I've heard just once through. So I'm very pleased with that indeed. I mean, I think that it's again, it's really difficult to begin to compare and contrast. I mean, if you're really into Seven Samurai, the film, you might consider getting both. But again, many considerations come to mind, of course, in terms of like shipping and cost, etc., and one's own budget allotted to physical media releases for the month, etc. So all things considered, you don't have to get both if you don't want to. And I think one will suffice and be a very, very robust endeavor or exploration into the world of Seven Samurai. So either one, I think, will be very, very a great experience indeed. But I do have certain maybe detailed points here and there that would point me to a direction in this category for one release and then in that category for another release. So it's all things considered, it might be very close to a draw, although what you're looking for might specifically what your interests are and what your needs and concerns are as a consumer might convince you to go from one to one over the other. Again, it's your choice and where you live and shipping, etc. So, but please keep that in mind. For me personally, I'm a huge fan of Kurosawa's works. And I wouldn't call myself I don't try to get every single release of Seven Samurai ever created, but I did want to have this. I did hear a number of great things about it, and I think overall I'm very pleased with the BFI release as it stands. Although I am also very pleased for the reasons I've tried to articulate here with the Criterion Collection release here in 2024. Okay, my dear friends, let us wind down our discussion of this really great release of a classic landmark film, a masterpiece of cinema, which is Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. And this is, as you can see, the packaging is very much like the earlier Blu-ray release, and this is the earlier Blu-ray release with the digipack or the outer cardboard shell in the inner compartment or the inner lining, etc. And it's the same principle here, both in the front and the back, with the font, which is very, I think, decorative and apropos, as well as this insignia or the logo, or if you will, the banner of the Seven Samurai, very memorable one, with which is also, I think, mirrored in the Blu-ray menus. And then you have the inner packaging with the discs here, as I tried to allude to earlier. The front and the back here, very nice. And the booklet would rest very snugly in there and then be closed like so. Just before I close it, let me just point out the booklet is, my understanding, what we have seen in the earlier Blu-ray, with some very, very minor changes with regard to, for instance, how it describes the master, etc. But the writings here are intact. Seven Samurai, 8 takes from Kenneth Turan and Peter Cowie and Philip Kemp, Peggy Chow, Alan Silver, Stuart Galbraith IV, and a tribute from Arthur Penn and a tribute from Sidney Lumet and Toshiro Mifune, in his own words, which is part of this new 4K release, which is, as I said, mirroring what we had in the earlier Blu-ray release booklet. Yes, 8 takes. Although I just want to point out one thing. This is the Blu-ray booklet from several years ago with this nice cover. And then we have the booklet for the new 4K release. So it's the same image, although I would say this is slightly maybe more pronounced black and whiteness. If you can note that, I think that's interesting. It's very apropos. But and then also there's a slight difference in the maroon colored spine of the booklet. This may be, for the 4K, maybe seeming a bit more brown maroon than the color for the spine for the Blu-ray. But that's again, I don't mind either way. I think it's very very interesting nonetheless. So that's the Criterion release. Very exciting stuff. Just to complete the conversation again, for those who might be interested, let me just point out very briefly the packaging for the BFI release. And it has a very hard, robust shell. This is harder and firmer than the Criterion's outer shell digipack. It's very sturdy. I mean, it's not impervious to damage, but it is very sturdy. So I like these hard bound, super reinforced outer shells. And then it has the booklet, which is a very nice booklet, and it has a number of writings. And great artwork design. So there's the booklet. Plus, it has a poster, which is the restoration poster, which I really like, as a front and the back. I like it when the poster art is a separate thing, rather than its own booklet. So I prefer to see the poster utilized in that fashion. So that's the poster, front and back. Here we go. So. Very interesting stuff indeed, so I like that very much. And then we have the plastic casing that encompasses the discs, and then you also have postcards, which are also part of the inner workings here, and you can see they are very interesting shots indeed. Look at that. There you go. So the paraphernalia and memorabilia aspect of the BFI release, I think, is quite impressive. So again, whatever your preferences in terms of the various details of the BFI release versus the Criterion release, or maybe you can see them hand in hand and both complementing each other to a certain degree. I'm very, very pleased with the BFI release. I think it's very strong in a lot of respects. In a lot of respects. So if I hear people saying they prefer the BFI release over the Criterion release, that wouldn't surprise me, and that I respect that choice very much. But I think also that the Criterion release is very strong indeed, and a wonderful reintroduction, a reemergence of the film Seven Samurai into the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, and also again in the occasion of this year 2024. Think about it. This is 1954 that the film was made, and here we are at the very tail end of 2024. So what is that by my count? 70 years? My goodness. And then we have the Toho, under the auspices of Toho, we have the 4K restoration. And it also maybe bodes well For those who know the state of affairs with respect to Toho's maybe recent activities in the realm of 4K restorations over the last couple years or so, this might be an indication of maybe more things to come. Again, fingers crossed with respect to physical media releases in North America and other territories outside of Japan, Criterion or otherwise, of other Toho films, such as the Toho works from Kurosawa. But in the meantime, we have wonderful releases of this new, very standout edition of Seven Samurai to greet us and to visit and revisit and revisit, hopefully many times over the course of many years. What a classic film this is. This is the work which is Seven Samurai. Whew. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Seven Samurai, including other works by Akira Kurosawa, including other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. And so until we see each other again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.